Well, hi everyone, welcome. I am Aubrey Adams. I am the director of Every Brain Matters, a nonprofit community developed by families negatively impacted by today's industrialized marijuana. And I welcome you all here today for another historic presentation, Taking on the Cannabis Industry and Winning with Illinois State Attorney Patrick Kennenally. Please excuse my stuffy voice as I am just getting over a bad cold, which I think was COVID. And I kindly ask you to refrain from commenting in the chat until the presentation is over. Mr. Kenneally will be available to answer your questions after he is done presenting. So now I am honored to introduce and welcome Patrick, who is a proud husband and father of 4 sons. Patrick earned his law degree from the Washington University School of Law in 2005. He has a master's degree in environmental law from the University of Vermont. And prior to law school, Patrick earned his bachelor's degree in biology and liberal arts from the College of Holy Cross, where he was named to the all-time Patriot League Academic Honor Roll. Patrick joined the McHenry County, Illinois State Attorney's Office in 2007 as an assistant state attorney. During his tenure, he worked in traffic court, misdemeanor court, felony court, as a special prosecutor, in the civil division, and as the first assistant. He handled thousands of criminal prosecutions and represented the county in civil litigation and on governmental related legal matters. Patrick has been awarded the Turning Point Peace and Justice Award for his work on behalf of victims of domestic battery and currently serves on the executive board of the McHenry County Substance Abuse Coalition. And now Patrick was elected as McHenry County's Illinois State Attorney in 2016. And we are grateful to say Patrick Kennenally has successfully sued the cannabis industry in McHenry County. And as a result, cannabis stores are now required to warn customers of the negative health consequences with in-store signage of the mental health dangers associated with cannabis use, including psychosis, depression, and suicidal ideation. And the cannabis businesses are also required to scrub their marketing and website of any suggestion that their products have medical benefits. Patrick believes more lawsuits are needed to protect people from the cannabis industry's predatory practices. And the Every Brain Matters community agrees and is honored to have Patrick Kennenally here today to help educate and advocate for more protections for our families. Thank you for being here today, Patrick, and I will turn this discussion over to you.
Okay, thank you, Aubrey, so much for having me and for inviting me. It's an honor to be here. It's been a privilege of mine to get to know you over the last, I would say, several weeks, if not months, and I'm beginning to realize what a force of nature you are when it comes to this issue and what an incredible network you've put together. So it's really an honor for me to be here and to be addressing this group, which over the years to come, I guarantee is only going to grow as cannabis becomes more ubiquitous and pervasive throughout the United States. So Aubrey, yes, I am the McHenry County State's Attorney. And for those of you who don't know much about Illinois other than our politics are totally corrupt and it's entirely flat. And we love the Bears. So go Bears this weekend. I don't know if any of you are Tennessee, if anybody's from Tennessee, but we're going to roll you guys this weekend. But we are what's considered to be a collar county. So 50+% of the Illinois population is in the Chicagoland area, probably more than that. I'd say probably 65%. And Cook County is basically Chicago, and then surrounding Cook County, it's sort of butted up right against the lake. Surrounding Cook County, there's 6 counties, and McHenry County is one of them, and we're the county to the northwest. So we have a really interesting community as well as a really interesting demographic that I think represents Illinois pretty well and is kind of like a little microcosm of it. So on the southeast side of our county, where most of our population lives, it's just basically a suburb or a bedroom community, and most of the people there have some connection to the city of Chicago, or at least Cook County. Many of them are taking the train in and out of the city every single day. As you move away from the southeast side of our county, you come into just sort of a ring, which is a lot of blue collar union type families, which is also sort of a little bit less suburban than the southeast side. And then as you get to our far northwest side, you run into farmland, and it's basically like Wisconsin or the middle of Illinois. I mean, we have people who are generational farmers and have been doing it for a very long time, and probably have a lot more in common with people in Iowa than they would people 30 miles to their southeast, who are very metropolitan and otherwise. So that's a little bit about McHenry County. I've shared my screen so you can sort of see our emblem, and that's the McHenry County State's Attorney's Office. And the Latin there, I'm Catholic, and so I should be able to pronounce Latin better than I actually do. But it's in Veritate et Justia Ethica Actio, which means in Latin that justice is truth and ethics in action. And that's sort of what we pride ourselves on at the McHenry County State's Attorney's Office is acting and speaking in truth, but doing so also with ethics, so that our ends so that our means must be justified in and of themselves, not necessarily ends. So that is a little bit about McHenry County, and I don't know if many or most of you had the opportunity to read the piece that I wrote for the most recent installment of the newsletter. But cannabis was never really something that was on my mind when I began in politics in 2016. And how I got involved is I was the special prosecutor at the state's attorney's office. I had no sort of political aspirations, and they called me in and they were like, hey, they were like, hey, come down and see the main guy. So I was like, oh no, what did I do? I'm thinking of all of the cases that I had and something that I screwed up. Sort of wringing my hands as I'm walking down the hallway, trying to figure out what exactly I've done to get a call to the big guy's office. And they said, we want you to run for state's attorney. They said, it's not going to be that much money of your own, and the politics, it'll be local politics. It's not that nasty. And you're going to have a lot of fun and meet a lot of interesting people. But for that last part, they BS'd me on almost all of it. And so, but by the time that I was actually in the political game, it was too late to get out. But as I started in 2016, there were a number of people who sort of breathlessly came up to me and began talking about cannabis. And in Illinois, they had passed medical cannabis, which, if you actually read the law and the disorders and diseases that it treats, it's a complete distortion, lie, and joke. But that's neither here nor there. I mean, the whole idea of the medical cannabis legalization is just sort of to make the paths straight for recreational cannabis legislation and to change the image of cannabis, which was previously been associated with unpopular subcultures, and turn what was once sort of a dangerous thing that people who you didn't necessarily agree with, associate with, or have a high regard for, and to change that perception and to rebrand it as something more akin to wellness and or medicine. And we're going to talk about that, but that's sort of the playbook. And they started that in Illinois back in 2010. And there were a lot of people, prescient people, who saw what ultimately was coming, especially as the Democrats, which is the party in power here, began to beat the drum for cannabis legalization. Anyway, they come up to me at these things and they'd be like, hey, like, what are we going to do about cannabis? They're getting ready to legalize this, and it's going to have all kinds of horrible consequences. And my experience with cannabis sort of began when I was probably 16 years old, when me and my buddies started smoking cannabis. And between 2016 and I would say by me being 24, maybe even 25, there wasn't too much time that went by that I or one of my friends was not holding cannabis. And so my experience was that cannabis was a good time, something that people should be doing on the weekends to calm them down, relax, unwind, decompress, have some laughs, have weird, strange, quirky conversations with people, eat, Doritos and pork rinds, And other than that, it's not really dangerous and it doesn't have the hangover, and it's certainly not as bad for you as alcohol. And I think one of the things about youth is a lot of times you have immunities with regard to consequences. And a lot of times consequences don't catch up to you as fast as when you're my age now, which is 45 or at least older. But I think also one of the things about youth is that you don't realize that you are actually suffering consequences at the time that you are. I thought that everybody smoked cannabis. And it's the same. I sort of stopped drinking when I had my first kid. And I just remember going to Wrigley Field for the first time, which is where the Chicago Cubs play. And my perception was when I would go to Wrigley Field during my drinking days was that like every single person there is drinking beer. There's not a single person there that's not drinking. And when I went there, when I had sort of just stopped drinking, I realized that that just really was not true. In fact, most people at Wrigley Field were not drinking beer. And so when I was a younger man and me and my friends were pushing the envelope and having a good time, I just presumed that this is how everybody my age was acting. And as I look back, especially in my 20s, I can see so many missed opportunities in my life, so many things that I could have been doing, which would have been far more productive, not only for me, everyone around me, my family, my future prospects, and otherwise that I was not doing by virtue of the fact that I was smoking too much cannabis. I look back and I think about two of my friends who have since been diagnosed with bipolar disorder and had serious breakdowns when they went off to college. And I asked myself what role I had in encouraging their cannabis use, which could have played a part in the devastating mental health disorders that they are currently suffering from. So anyway, I'm going to jump back to 2016. I had not realized that at the time. And so I thought that many of the people that were coming up to me were maybe somewhat reactionaries and certainly overreacting to the prospect of legal cannabis. I had sort of bought into many of the talking points as well as the very clever, consistent, and years-long marketing effort by the cannabis industry, which sort of elicits in everybody just kind of a shrug when it comes to the prospect of cannabis legalization. And I was sort of made uncomfortable by these conversations. And I'm a lawyer. And once you get to know me, you'll learn that I have somewhat of a pugilistic persona, which means that I like to fight and I like to verbally spar with you. It has not helped my marriage, but it is something that I do that I just sort of naturally do. And I think sometimes people misperceive me because I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to understand things. And how I learn and how I understand things is I have an argument with you, especially if you have a different position than me. And I very often change my mind, but I'm trying to figure out what is true and what is right. And so I thought to myself, like, all right, like if these people are going to come up to me and start talking about cannabis and give me all these facts and statistics about how bad it's going to be and doom and gloom and how the sky ultimately is going to fall upon that bill being passed and signed by the governor. Well, I'm going to do my own research, and I did not go into that research with sort of an open mind. I went into that research basically with a strong sense of confirmation bias, seeking to confirm what I already knew, which was cannabis was fine and it's not going to be a big deal. And I have a biology background, so I can sort of read and understand those studies. And as I began looking at it and reading it, and I think part of my tendency to sort of question and argue helped me out here, because as I began to sort of think about what the cannabis industry was saying, and then looking at many of the facts underlying it, I saw that there was a significant disconnect, and that many of the people who were espousing the views with regard to the harmlessness of cannabis or with regard to its virtues or the benefits that it's going to have either for individuals or at a more or more broadly at a social level, I realized that they were full of crap. And so I began to sort of change my mind. I think in the article, I say something to the effect of, just like the atheist who picks up the Bible and by the time they finish it and put it down are on fire with the Lord, by the time that I had finished my sort of quote unquote cannabis research, I realized that we have a problem here and that somebody has to start speaking out and addressing it, because every single other person that I talked to about the issue almost felt the same way that I felt prior to me during the research, which is shrug and no big deal. It's coming, get out of the way. And we just sort of have to make the best of it. So anyway, and that's a very lonely place to be. And I'm sure many of you have sort of felt that way before, which is it feels like a lonely crusade, especially from my perch in McHenry County. Before I was introduced to networks like this one and SAM and some of the other places, I just thought that I was this lone wolf sort of speaking out in the wilderness and nobody was talking to me. So that's enough talking. Let me go to my next slide. Okay, so this is, I don't know if you can see the top of it, but it's McHenry County State's Attorney asked local lawmakers to vote against cannabis legalization. So I began speaking out about cannabis legalization as Governor Pritzker got ready to legalize it in 2020. And let me just, if you ever want to know how Illinois politics works, I'll just tell you a quick little story. Governor Pritzker is the heir to a hotel fortune, and him and his family are one percenters. They're the one percenters of the one percenters. He grew up in California. He comes to Illinois for business. He wants to be a politician. So he spends almost $200 million of his own money to become the Illinois governor. And the Republican Party in Illinois is nowhere even close to that. So he becomes the governor. He has siblings as well as other family members that are very well positioned. One of his family members was his sister, who was head of the Marijuana Policy Project. The Marijuana Policy Project is a DC-based industry marijuana group that writes and pushes legislation for the legalization of marijuana throughout the state. So the Marijuana Policy Project wrote the legislation for Illinois, gave it to Governor Pritzker, who gave it to a very influential member of our House, as well as a very influential member of our Senate, who sponsored the bills and pushed it through in 2020. And the debate on the bill lasted about an hour, and then they get hundreds of pages of bills, which they're just now seeing. They read it and they sign it, and marijuana becomes legal in the state of Illinois. Now, the one sponsor in the Senate who pushed the bill, she retires from the Senate and becomes head, president, and CEO of the Marijuana Policy Project in DC. The other House representative who pushed the bill in the House and ultimately got it passed through there, her wife became vice president of Revolution Cannabis, which is one of the biggest cannabis producers in the state of Illinois. So that's just a little summation of how things work in the state of Illinois and how laws ultimately get passed. It's not necessarily based on debate, best ideas, overcoming dissent or opposition. Many of these things are sort of fait accomplis before the first line is drawn on a bill or a bill is actually introduced into the Senate. So anyway, I'm basically fighting a quixotic type of fight here when I'm coming out against marijuana legalization, but it was nice of the local newspaper to pick it up. So this is just sort of the juxtaposition between the people who are against marijuana and what the marijuana industry has done in some of their slick marketing. So you just have to sort of dwell on these two pictures and just kind of think about the guy at the top there. Okay, like that guy is a dork, like pure and simple. He's got his glasses. He looks like he goes birding on the weekends. Looks like he probably wears Crocs with socks. That is not somebody that when you see that picture is going to influence the kids on sort of how they look, and then compare that with what you see below. So the guy on the left, I forget his name, but my kids would know it. He's super cool and slick and smoking a joint, and he's sponsored by marijuana companies, and he's on Instagram promoting certain products. The woman on the left is one of the biggest cannabis influencers on social media. And so if we were even just going to have a discussion, which let's say the broader public and especially the younger generation, if you show them a picture of me and you show them a picture of the people that the cannabis industry wants you to see. And of course, the cannabis industry is not showing you people who are being involuntarily committed. They're not showing you bodies on the side of a roadway, which has been ravaged by a cannabis-induced driver. They're not showing you the family members of people who are, worried sick to the point of causing themselves disease and stress-related disorders because their family member is out there with cannabis substance use disorder, as well as paranoia and psychosis. They're not showing you any of those. This is the face that they want to present. And we've lost the argument, I guess is the point, before I even have a chance to utter a word. And I just think that that's really important to sort of point out, which is where do we want to ultimately have this conversation? And what I would submit is that the worst place to have this conversation would be in the public sphere on social media and otherwise, despite the fact that we have to have a presence there. But I do think that there's a better venue for it, which we can talk about a little bit later. So prior to legalization in Illinois, this is what the law was. So if you had 10 grams or less, you would not be arrested. You would not be brought to jail. You're not facing any time in the Illinois Department of Corrections. Rather, it was a civil violation, which was punished by a fine of between $100 and $200, which is usually less than a traffic ticket. So if you were caught with just a personal amount of cannabis, you would be given a citation. Your day wouldn't be ruined. You wouldn't be arrested. You could pay it and you'd be out $100. If you had between 10 and 30 grams, so 30 grams is coming up on just sort of one of those big sort of ounce bags, that would be a Class B misdemeanor. If you had more than 30 grams, well, now you're starting to get into the realm of perhaps having enough to begin dealing. That would be a Class A misdemeanor. Now, a misdemeanor offense, you cannot go to the Illinois Department of Corrections in the state of Illinois for a misdemeanor defense. I've been prosecuting for almost 20 years now. I have never seen a person spend any significant time in jail because of a Class B or a Class A cannabis misdemeanor. I mean, those people would be out within a day, and their bond would either be nothing or certainly something that they would pay. So the idea, and we can talk about this a little bit more, but the idea that cannabis is leading to sort of mass incarceration or unjust incarceration, at least in the state of Illinois in McHenry County, is entirely fraudulent. But what you should notice is that what is highlighted in orange, go Bears, is what has been vacated through cannabis legalization. Everything in white is still on the book. So if you have more than 30 grams of cannabis in the state of Illinois, you are subject to arrest as well as prosecution for a Class A misdemeanor. If you have between 100 grams and 500 grams, or basically anything over that, and it goes up to a Class 1 felony, and a Class 1 felony, your sentencing range is between 4 and 15 years in the Illinois Department of Corrections. And of course, for delivery-related offenses, there are steeper penalties. There's a Class X felony. There's the Class X felony, which is really pounds and pounds of marijuana. 5,000 grams or more. That is potentially punishable by 6 to 30 years in the Illinois Department of Corrections. And then obviously production as well. It's still illegal to run your own production unless you have a medical card in the state of Illinois. So while cannabis is quote unquote legal, it is legal within very strict confines. And I think there's a lot of people who are mistaken with respect to the amount of cannabis that they can have, as well as them sharing that cannabis for profit is also still illegal. So even if you go to a dispensary and you buy cannabis and you then sell that off to your friend, you have by definition and necessarily committed a criminal offense in the state of Illinois. So they said that. So one of the justifications for legalizing cannabis was they said, we need the revenue because the state of Illinois has significant pension debt. So if you ever can't sleep at night, go to Google and type in states with the worst debt. And New Jersey and Illinois are going to come up. The state of Illinois is about $300 billion in pension debt. And that's a modest estimate. There's also estimates that show that we're in more dire straits with respect to the amount of money that we currently owe. So this right here is the amount of revenue that the state of Illinois is generating as a result of cannabis. So you can see that it's going up and it's beginning to sort of plateau and slow down. And I expect that it will peak here in the next several years, probably at about $1.5 trillion. Excuse me, probably about $1.5 billion. So the next slide gives you an indication of the amount of tax revenue that the state of Illinois is acquiring. And as you can see, in fiscal year 2023, we actually made less than we did in 2022. So think about it this way. Let's say that tops out at $500 million. So we have $300 billion in debt, and we're pulling in $500 million a year. What that means is that we would have to sell drugs to our citizens in the state of Illinois for decades if we wanted to pay off the debt that we owe just now. So when people tell you in Illinois, or if you're in a state that is debt-ridden, that cannabis is going to make an impact or significantly affect the ability of your state to pay off funds, you can show them something like this, and you can suggest to them that not only does cannabis come with enormous costs that, of course, they never factor in when they pass legalization. This is really an ineffective way to do it. And in places like Colorado, what you're seeing is that the revenues are just continuing to decrease, especially as a black market presence increases and as the market reaches concentration. There's sort of lies when it comes to cannabis, and then there's damnable lies. And one of the most damnable lies that we have heard is that cannabis use is not going to increase if we legalize it. And the logic behind that is they said that, hey, look, anybody that wants to smoke cannabis currently in Illinois has access to it easily. All they would have to do is make a couple phone calls to the friend that smoked cannabis, and they'd have access to their dealer. So it's basically widely available on the black market. And if we legalize it, nobody who doesn't want to smoke cannabis is not smoking already. So therefore, nothing really in terms of increases is going to happen. Just if you look at the date here, this is the data that Illinois is willing to provide. So we're in 2024 now, and the last data that they had with regard to use is back in 2021. I do expect that to be updated with their report next year, but you can see already between 2020 and 2021, the year that they legalized it, you can see significant increases in the amount of cannabis that all age groups are using. And one of the things about human beings is we are incredibly social creatures, and we think very oftentimes in terms of symbols, and we also take our cues from other people, but also sort of the broader consensus. And so if you're going to on day zero, say that cannabis is a dangerous drug that should not be illegal because it has social and individual health costs which do not justify legalization, many people are going to take that message and they are going to internalize it, and they are going to say to themselves, I am going to stay away from cannabis, not because I'm worried about getting arrested or going to jail. I'm going to stay away from cannabis because that appears to be the consensus with respect to the right thing to do. When you legalize cannabis, you are sending a very strong cultural message that cannabis is okay. And when you send that cultural message to people, more people are going to use. And then when you reinforce that message with the prodigious powers of capitalism and marketing that the cannabis industry is putting behind this, you are going to see dramatic increases in the number of people that are using cannabis. And I fear that's what's happening in the state of Illinois and will continue to happen. And if we actually had accurate information on this graph, I should almost guarantee, but I would predict that curve is continuing to go up at a rapid and steep rate. This slide is probably one of the ones that scares me the most. Oh, and remember, this is back in 2021. And if you look at if you look on the left, what you'll see is frequency of past month cannabis use in 2018 through 2020 by people with serious mental health illnesses. So you're talking about people with schizophrenia. You're talking about people with schizoaffective disorder. You're talking about people with psychosis. You're talking about people with bipolar with psychotic symptoms. You're talking about people with bipolar just with general symptoms. You're talking about people with suicidal ideation. You're talking about people with serious cases of depression. And what you see there is that 35% of the Illinois population in the year that it was legalized had used within the last 30 days, which really is the metric that these epidemiologists use to measure recent cannabis use. So how regular, so what this tells you is that about 35% of people with serious mental health disorders are smoking cannabis on a regular basis. And that is terrifying. And that should be terrifying. And again, this is only the data that we have from 2020. I can only imagine what these figures look like now. It could be in excess of half of the population with a serious mental health disorder. And you can also see that cannabis use has gone up considerably for people with mental health disorders, as well as everybody else after legalization in 2020. So if you look also on the graph to your right, that's just the frequency of past month cannabis use. And if you go down to the very bottom, you see that males, so about 16% of males have recently used cannabis or 17% have recently used cannabis or regularly used cannabis. And what we know from many of the research is that the gender, which is most subject to being affected by cannabis and have their mental health affected by cannabis in a negative way, is men. So there was the Danish study where they looked, this was most recently probably the coup de grace when it comes to establishing a causal connection between cannabis use as well as schizophrenia. And they have sort of a single payers health system over there, so they're able to acquire all of the medical records. And they looked at 6 million different medical records. And what they found was that a third of the cases of schizophrenia could have been in men, could have been prevented but for cannabis use. So think about that. 33% of men would not have developed schizophrenia, one of the most immiserating possible conditions you can have as an individual, as well as for everybody around you, had that person never been exposed to cannabis. And so the fact that men are using cannabis at, I would say, reasonably significant higher rates than women is also cause for alarm. And again, you just have to look at the fact that that this is just data from 2019 to 2020. They say that cannabis is going to reduce the amount of liquor that's consumed in Illinois, and that, of course, is not true. It's the amount of liquor that's being consumed is the same as it was prior to legalization. So, the other thing that many of the cannabis advocates in Illinois talked about was this concept of social justice. And they would say things like, marginalized Black people, people of color are far more likely to be arrested than whites who are similarly situated in terms of being arrested for cannabis. And therefore, it's a social justice issue, and it's in furtherance of equality as well as equity that we legalize cannabis. And my response to that is, let's say that we found that marginalized group or people who have been subject to historical forms of discrimination were being arrested at DUIs or retail thefts or other types of crimes that nobody questions whether or not they should be illegal. Let's say that we were able to establish that they were being arrested at higher rates and maybe even disproportionate rates with respect to how often they're committing these types of crimes. The solution to that would not be to legalize DUI. The solution to that would not be to make retail theft legal. The solution to that would be to amend and reform the manner in which these types of crimes are being enforced. And Reverend Gregory Seal, who had a big church on the south side of Chicago, and he was formerly the president of the Rainbow Push Coalition in Illinois. And I don't know how familiar you are with the Rainbow Push Coalition, but that was the organization that Jesse Jackson started decades ago. He was adamantly against. He was one of the few who was adamantly against legalization of cannabis. And what he would point, and he said, but look, basically all this is this is profit driven. And that's ultimately what it is. And what he would point to is, he says, look, if you're going to legalize cannabis, the people with the worst cannabis use disorder rates currently in Illinois are African Americans and impoverished people. So all you're going to be doing is making that situation that much worse. You're just going to be spreading addiction among the very populations that can least afford to have this type of thing be shoved down their throat. And then many people would say, well, this is sort of something that I touched on earlier, but I can let me sort of drill down on it here, which is, we have to legalize cannabis, because if we don't legalize cannabis, we're going to continue to have a mass incarceration rate. So I would tell people in 2019, as they were having, as we were having the discussion with respect to whether or not cannabis should be legalized, I said, I will get you the key to the McHenry County Jail. And I want you to go to the McHenry County Jail, and I want you to let out everybody there who's there solely for a cannabis-related offense. And I said, I can assure you that there will be 0 people in the jail, because the criminal justice system does not have time for cannabis-related offenses. We had way too much other stuff going on, and the least thing that we had time for was minor possessory cannabis types of offenses. So in 2019, there were 202 inmates that were in the Illinois Department of Corrections, which represented less than 0.5% of all of the people who were incarcerated in the Illinois Department of Corrections, who were there only for a cannabis-related offense. And I can promise you that those 202 inmates were there not for possessing 10 grams or less or 30 grams of less for their own personal use. Rather, these were drug traffickers who were trafficking hundreds of pounds of cannabis, probably along with some other stuff. So when you talk about, well, what should be done about cannabis? Like we want to make our reaction to cannabis, let's say, proportionate with the nature of the offense. And maybe in the past, there's been a little bit of an overwrought response to cannabis that has caused a lot of decent, normal people to get sort of pulled into the web of the criminal justice system, et cetera. Well, the answer has always been decriminalization. So you don't make it legal, and you don't allow huge national, if not international, corporations to market it to your citizens to get them using it as much as they possible all day long. Rather, you decriminalize it and you make minor possessory amounts of cannabis proportional to the offense, which is what we did in Chicago in 2016 under Governor Rauner. So as I talked about, he decriminalized 10 grams or less, and you could even move that up to 30 grams or less. And what they found is that prior to decriminalization, the Chicago police or the Cook County Sheriff, sort of all of them together, they made over 21,000 misdemeanor marijuana arrests. In Cook County in 2017, after decriminalization, only 129 people were arrested for misdemeanor marijuana offenses, which I think essentially had solved the problem. All right, so now we're sort of into the entree of what I was asked to talk about. So when so in 2020, cannabis was legalized. COVID hit. They, in Illinois, their lottery system for dispensing cannabis licenses was, of course, not done on the up and up, so to speak, and it was subject to lawsuits. And so the ability to get recreational cannabis off the ground was delayed really until 2022. And in 2022, many of the dispensaries began to pop up throughout the state of Illinois, and they started mostly in Cook County, and then they began to spread out to places like McHenry County, the rest of the Collar County, and now they're all over the state. And so currently there are about 7 cannabis dispensaries in McHenry County. And almost all of the local officials in McHenry County sort of rolled out the red carpet, despite the fact that their state's attorney was expressing concerns. I guess it goes to show you how much influence I have around here. But when the conversation is, hey, Kennelly's worried about something, or we're going to make millions of dollars in tax revenue, Kennelly's worried about something in terms of the hierarchy of what people are going to listen to, sort of falls to the wayside, as even I can understand. So local municipalities can tax all sales and dispensaries at about 4%. So you're talking about millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars that's being distributed to local municipalities, not to mention the county. And then that's not to mention the huge chunk of money that the state takes in sales tax when it comes to cannabis dispensaries. But I began to look at some of the cannabis websites. And if you ever are suffering from a form of insomnia and can't sleep, what will put you to bed is pulling up the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act, which is the law that legalized cannabis. And one of the provisions in there that's buried in there is that recreational cannabis dispensaries, transporters, and producers, they cannot make any therapeutic, medical, or health claims about their products. All right. So they cannot say anything that their product has any medical benefit, health benefit, therapeutic benefit, or otherwise. And the rhetorical question, which I'll throw out to the group, is, do you think that they're abiding by that? And the answer is hell no, not even close. In fact, their entire sales strategy is organized around turning cannabis into a therapeutic, is to turning cannabis into medicine. And as you can see from the slide, they're very coy about it. So if you just sort of like looked at this and just allowed sort of the overall impression of what this slide is telling you to seep in, you would clearly take away from this that cannabis use can treat all of these things, you know? But then if you sort of focus your eyes, maybe get your readers on, and it says cannabis is, and you read it, and it says cannabis is being studied for the treatment of these symptoms and conditions. And that's a lot of times how they will frame the broader conversation when it comes to what actually is the tie between cannabis and some of the health benefits. Oftentimes, and there are egregious examples that I'm going to show you where they do actually make a direct connection, but oftentimes they sort of hedge at it and they imply it. And it's all sort of part of a subconscious marketing effort where they show you something like this. The clear impression is that cannabis treats this stuff, but then in the fine print, it says something like, no, it's being studied for, it's being considered for, it may help, it's being researched for, which again gives the overall impression that cannabis is treatment for medicine. And then they pull out the sort of the age-old nonsensical argument that, cannabis has been illegal for so long, and therefore we don't have enough information because the United States government has put its thumb down and squashed any good faith research that people are doing with respect to cannabis. And it's like, first of all, that's not true. There's tons and tons of research out there. And if you want to read it, go to the National Academy of Sciences study from 2017, which has already been updated, or any number of resources. And there's been tons of studies overseas or otherwise, but that's one of their favorite little ploys when you confront them on the fact that the research not support or hold up many of the claims or suggestions that they're making about cannabis. This is one of my favorite ones. You know what I mean? Like if there was ever a guy who is, let's say, in online marketing and earned his money with sort of image association and cannabis, like this is it. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to take things that you positively associate and they're trying to tie that to cannabis. So like who do we trust more in our society than doctors? And that's not just me saying it. You can go to the US News and World Report and some of these other opinion sites, and they sort of rank the professions which are most trusted, and doctors invariably come out on that. So of course you have what appear, and now whether or not whether or not you could prove beyond a reasonable doubt that that's an actual doctor and not a scientist or just some kook dressed up on Halloween as a lab technician or whatever the case may be, but that looks like a doctor. And what is that doctor associating himself with? Cannabis. And so the overall feel of this, what they want you to do, what they want your grandma to do, who's having trouble sleeping at night, or who may have gout, or who may have fibromyalgia, they want her to look at this and they want her to say, like all of that stuff that I've heard about cannabis over the last 70 years that I associated with hippies and all the rest of it, all of that's nonsense. It appears as though it's associated with blueberries and superfoods and doctors and all the rest of it. And how harmless can it possibly be? But this is a blog post on one of the websites from McHenry County. And again, it's a complete misrepresentation. It's a complete distortion when you compare what it is that they're suggesting here, what it is that they're applying here, what it is that they're really asserting here, and what the science ultimately backs up. Again, they're talking about homeostasis. Homeostasis is not a medical concept. Like, it's not a real thing. Like, go to your doctor and ask them to do a test on what your homeostasis is, and they'll look at you as though you have three eyes and maybe even start thinking that you're suffering from some sort of disease that they need to check up on you for, So, they take out these pseudo scientific terms, these sort of, they've created their own field of like apocryphal medicine, where now they've come up with terms like homeostasis, and then they talk about the endocannabinoid system as something that they're not taking it head on. They're not going directly at it. They're talking about the endocannabinoid system, which of course we would associate with cannabinoids, with cannabis is, and they're saying that they're suggesting that one of your problems could be that you're out of balance. You're out, like there's some stability or some insufficiency, and putting cannabinoids into your system could bring your body back into homeostasis, whatever that is. And then this is one of my favorites, because experts don't currently have evidence that medical cannabis is useful in treating a condition doesn't mean that people don't experience some benefits from use. Just because we have no evidence to back up anything that we're saying, that doesn't mean you shouldn't smoke cannabis because some people somewhere are saying that it helps them. If there's ever an instance of bad faith, and if there's ever an admission with respect to how full of baloney they know that they actually are, this to me, if you read the subtext, would seem to indicate that that's what it is. Again, so they've come up with, so how is it that they have the burden of proof in explaining something to you, which is, okay, we've known about cannabis for thousands and thousands of years. You're claiming that it's basically a wonder drug that treats virtually every condition known to man and every type of and every type of dysfunction that has ever vexed man, from Crohn's disease to glaucoma to cancer to bipolar to depression to gout to IBS. So there's been this wonder drug which has existed all of this time. How is it, number one, that we haven't been using this medicinally on a widespread basis throughout the United States since its inception? That's number one. And how exactly does it work? And how is it that one single drug, is capable of treating all of these disorders? And so what they say is, well, they're like, okay, well, we're going to have to come up with an explanation for that. And so how they do that is they say, all right, well, there are these two strains. One is indica over here, and one is sativa. And despite the fact that it's basically has the exact same constituent properties and basically has the exact same active ingredients, they have diametrically opposed effects on you. So the indica effects are relaxation, reduced sensation of pain, sleep aid, and body high, whereas the sativa effects are energizing, boosting creativity, euphoria, boosting productivity, and cerebral high. Now you're starting to get a sense of sort of what the logic is. All right, so if I had a product and I wanted you to use it as much as you possibly could all day long, I'm going to want to market you something that's good for you to use in the morning. I'm going to want to market you something that's good to use in the afternoon. And then I'm going to want to market you something that's good to use in the evening. And I'm going to want to market to you as medicine, something that you need, because what do we all have to do every single day other than take our vitamins and take whatever medicine is being prescribed to us by the good doctor right there. So, okay, well then how is it then that cannabis is able to treat all of these different disorders? Well, it's able to treat all of these different disorders because of hybrids. And so what we do is we take the sativa over here, and then we take an indica and we mix it together. and out pops a hybrid that's best for treating your depression. And then we take a sativa over here, we take an indica over here, and we mix it together, and out pops Pineapple Express, which is really good for IBS. And then so there's an infinite variety of hybrids, which is why cannabis in and of itself can have so many different products capable of treating and addressing so many different things that people want it to cure and relieve for them. And then on top of that, throw in terpenes. So terpenes, and I know this from my botany class, terpenes are basically those compounds that give plants their characteristic smell. So if you're ever out in a pine forest and you get that telltale pine smell that makes you think of Christmas or whatever, those are the terpenes coming off the pine needles. They are almost invariably biologically inert and or harmful to you should you consume them. But what they say is, well, there's also an infinite number of terpenes and an infinite number of terpenes and terpene concentrations, which are in the different hybrids. And that also has what's called an entourage effect, which can enhance the THC and can enhance the CBD effects. And that also plays in to why different strains are able to do different things physiologically for you, and again, treat so many different conditions. Here's a particularly galling example of something that I found on one of the dispensary's websites, which is, what is the optimal cannabis dosage for anxiety, depression? And the answer to that question is nothing. 0 is the optimal cannabis dosage for anxiety and depression, because cannabis causes and exacerbates pre-existing depression or anxiety. But what they say is, if you read the frame, generally you should start with a low dose of cannabis, such as half a gummy or drop of oil, and increase the dosage until you feel the desired effect. This can involve beginning with a 20 to 40 milligram. That's a ton of cannabis, 20 to 40 milligrams daily. That is a lot of cannabis. And then they want you to increase it. So then the doctor, whoever this is, this authority figure who's talking about prescribing you something, whoever this is telling that you should be increasing your cannabis dosage in order to effectively address your anxiety as well as your depression. And as soon as your anxiety and depression begin to get worse because you're smoking cannabis, what should you do? Take more cannabis. And so it's really loathsome, some of the marketing that they're doing. So this is a product description. Here's Blueberry Haze. This was being advertised on one of the cannabis company. This was being advertised on one of the websites of one of the dispensaries in McHenry County. And it's talking about, apart from its pain relieving properties, it can help with stress, nausea, anxiety, lack of concentration. That's one example. This helps with depression and PTSD. And again, like the malice involved in what the cannabis industry is doing here cannot be overstated. And what I mean by that is, not only will cannabis, not only does cannabis not treat these disorders. So you have these desperate people who are suffering from perhaps severe forms of anxiety, severe forms of depression, severe forms of post-traumatic stress disorder, maybe from service to their country. So not only are you lying to them and saying, buy our product and you'll feel better, the opposite is true. Buy our product, we will make you feel worse. We don't care how much you're struggling. We don't care how much you're suffering currently. We are indifferent to your suffering as long as we can turn a profit. And if there is really ever something that defines the cannabis industry, I think this is it. And I really think that we have to pause and allow what they're doing truly to resonate in order to really grasp just how dark a lot of this is. Again, you got Papaya X Gelato, great choice for treating chronic fatigue, depression, stress, appetite loss, as well as chronic pain. And here you go. This is what I talked about before. If you're low on energy, there's many cannabis products that can start your engine and keep you active and energized all day. So get up in the morning and take some Bebo, and you're going to be energized all day. If you experience sort of a after lunch crash, we have the perfect strain for you for you to take in the afternoon. If you're studying for a test, or if you have a big presentation at work and you need an extra jolt of creativity, there's a perfect sativa strain that we have for you that we can give to you. So sort of any challenge that human beings face, whether it's distress, whether it's worry, whether it's low energy, whether it's lack of creativity, and then all of the medical conditions, anything that any challenge that the human being faces, they want you to know they have a product in mind that ultimately is going to be able to address that for you, and that it's not really that you need to overcome your challenge, but rather your body, your endocannabinoid system is on the fritz to a certain extent, and you need to recharge it or supplement it with their products. Okay. So I was talking to you about the Cannabis Tax and Regulation Act, and this is the exact language. It prohibits any advertising that promotes the overconsumption of cannabis or cannabis products, or that makes any health, medicinal, or therapeutic claims about cannabis or cannabis-infused products. I don't know how common, if you are listening from other states, I don't know how common this type of language is in all of the other forms of legislation that's legalized cannabis throughout the country. But you may want to check for similar phrases, because a lot of times what states do is they take legislation from other states and they basically just copy and paste it with a few, few, if any, changes. So my guess is something like this is in all of the legislation that has made cannabis legal and recreational throughout the country. This is a problem. This is a major problem for cannabis companies, and this is an existential threat for cannabis companies because it attacks them right at their most vulnerable place and right where they've sort of centered all of their marketing around. And if only somebody in the state of Illinois or otherwise would enforce this, I think it would go a long way. But in the absence of that, so who should be enforcing it in Illinois is the Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation. And there was a study done and the study was based in Illinois, and it took a sample of the social media posts of a number of cannabis dispensaries, and it made a determination, either yes or no, as to whether or not they were violating this specific provision of the Cannabis Tax and Regulation Act. And what it found is that a third of the social media posts of the cannabis companies in Illinois were violating it. Okay, so you have that on one hand. How many enforcement actions do you think any of our regulators in Illinois have taken, whether it's the IDFPR or the Illinois Department of Health? And the answer to that, I'm sure you can probably guess, is zero. They have done nothing to threaten or kill the golden goose, and they will not do anything under the current administration in Illinois, because they feel like they're raking in too much money. And this is a signature part of the current powers that be platform, and they don't want to do anything that's going to make them look bad, undermine them, or embarrass them. And so ultimately, I said to myself, well, something needs to be done. And there is the Consumer Fraud and Deceptive Practices Act. And the Consumer Fraud and Deceptive Practices Act is really a law that exists in every single state, and it's almost identical state to state. And what it says is, and I'll just read it to you and then we can talk about it, but it says, unfair methods of competition and unfair or deceptive acts or practices, including but not limited to the use or employment of any deception, fraud, false pretense, false promise, misrepresentation, or the concealment, suppression, or omission of any material fact with the intent that others rely upon the concealment, suppression, or omission of such material fact are hereby declared unlawful, whether any person has in fact been misled, deceived, or damaged thereby. So if you are marketing a product and you are deceiving people, or you are marketing it under a false pretense or a false promise, or any type of misrepresentation or the concealment of material facts, and I would say one material fact would be that our product will injure you and perhaps be a causal factor in you developing serious mental health disorders, if not worse. then you have violated the Consumer Fraud and Deceptive Practices Act. So I said to myself, like, am I reading, like, why isn't anybody else doing something? Like, why am I the only one looking at, like, am I crazy? Like, it's right here and they're saying this and the law says this. What exactly is the hang up and why do I seem to be the only one that has recognized this and has any type of will or appetite to do something about it? So I was like, I just kept sort of thinking that I'm missing something. Like, what am I missing? And ultimately, I convinced myself that I didn't think that I was. So the Consumer Fraud and Deceptive Practices Act can be enforced by the Illinois Attorney General. So many of the attorney generals throughout the states use this very act to bring down the tobacco companies in the 90s, but it can also be enforced in Illinois by state's attorneys. So I said, you know what, like I'm going to read this Consumer Fraud and Deceptive Practices Act and I'm going to acquaint myself with it, because prior to that, there just had not really been an occasion to use it. And one of the things that I'm able to do is to send a subpoena to people who I would be investigating for a potential violation of that. So I wrote up a huge, like an 80-page subpoena. I copied and pasted all of the instances with regard to product descriptions and blog posts that the cannabis dispensaries in McHenry County had put up on their website. I included that all in a huge subpoena, and I asked for all information related to this. What's their basis of knowledge? What's their source, et cetera, et cetera. And it took me, I don't know, 3 weeks, a month to do that. And I sent it by email as well as certified mail to all of the cannabis dispensaries in the county, and it was not more than, I don't know, 30 minutes after I sent the first email that my phone starts ringing, and the phone and it's lawyers who represent the cannabis company, and they are being very, very nice as well as gracious, and they want to talk, and they want to work with us, the McHenry County State's Attorney's Office, on this and making sure that nobody is being misled, and they want to be good corporate citizens, and they certainly want to be good, strong members of the community and give back and not do anything which is going to jeopardize or undermine the mental health of my constituents. I thought, great, like that's great. And they all kept calling. And what's interesting about cannabis attorneys is it's not the big trial guys. So one of the things that I was worried about was that this was going to go to a big firm in Chicago, like a Kirkland and Ellis or Jenner and Block, and they were going to take a more, let's say, defiant posture to the little state's attorney in McHenry County, who again is threatening to kill the golden goose. What it seems like the cannabis dispensaries as of right now is I don't think that they see how vulnerable they actually are. And who they've hired are a bunch of regulatory attorneys who are branding and advertising themselves as regulatory or cannabis attorneys who really don't know how to do trial work, but know basically how to read regulations and how to hobnob with many of the regulators. And so that's who they are employing. And I just really don't think that they have a sense of the tort liability that they face, because that's just not their area of expertise. But anyway, long and the short is we ultimately set up a time where we would go down to the city of Chicago, which really isn't that far for us. And so we did. And so we met at one of the high rises on the 40th floor, all of their attorney. And we tried to sort of consolidate everything. And I'd sent them a complaint, which is what I intended to file. And I showed them all of my evidence about how, like, look, you guys are clearly violating the Consumer Fraud and Deceptive Practices Act. You're also clearly violating the Cannabis Tax and Regulation Act, which is also a problem in and of itself. You're facing serious liability as well as serious penalties that you're going to owe us. So do you want to talk about this before we file the complaint? And oh man, do they want to talk about it? So they rolled out the red carpet for me and Norm, who is my civil chief. And we go down there and we're on the 40th floor looking over Chicago River, Wacker Drive. I don't know if you're familiar at all with Chicago, but it's really the downtown business district, the hub of Chicago. And it's me and Norm on sort of one side of a long table, and I would say probably 30 attorneys on the other side of the table with all of their assistants and people whispering things to them and whatever. But so I felt like Aaron Brockovich But they could not have been nicer. And the reason that they could not have been nicer is because they were trying to ingratiate themselves to me, and I have to admit it was somewhat successful. Many of the croissants that they put before me, and the coffee was terrific. But I just sort of thinking, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I'm like, okay, the only thing I'm asking for is that they warn all of their customers about the mental health dangers of cannabis. So basically, put up a sign in a dispensary that cannabis use is associated with the development, onset, or worsening of schizophrenia, psychosis, bipolar, depression, and anxiety. And then I wanted them to go through their marketing as well as their websites, as well as many of the mailers that they were putting out in the community, and just scrub it of anything that would violate the Cannabis Tax and Regulation Act, specifically scrub it of any medical claims that they were making with respect to their product. And so we're sort of coming to the end of those negotiations and wordsmithing exactly what the warning is going to look like. And then I'm like, I want $1 million to conduct a cannabis education campaign in McHenry County. You guys have already put out so much bad information and have convinced so many people that cannabis does have a medicinal component. I think we need to start to unwind that a little bit. And, and I just threw out the figure $1 million just because that's what occurred to me. And anyway, they sort of negotiate. They were like, $1 million, I would, and they negotiated me down, but they ended up giving me $100,000 to do just that. And so in addition to the signs, and in addition to having scrubbed all of their marketing of any false medical therapeutic statements, we also got some money to put up some billboards in McHenry County. And so this is one, and it's been up for about 5 months. And that's one. Here's another. This is probably my favorite, and I think this is really the one that pops the most. But this one is up in McHenry County as well. And this is a third one, which is adolescent cannabis use is associated with lower IQ and professional development. And that's sort of a pink sign. And the reason we made it pink was we wanted sort of moms to look at that and to recognize that, especially when it comes to developing brains, cannabis is not just a phase that your kid goes through, and it's not just sort of a normal part of coming of age. Rather, it really is a potentially catastrophic threat to the well-being of your son, daughter, and or their future. So that is the end of my presentation. And I think I stopped sharing my screen, Aubrey. Is that right? Can you see my big mug? All right.
Thank you so much, Patrick. That was excellent.
Okay.
Presentation. We will now open it up to questions and comments. So anybody can either unmute, I'll turn on the chat back on if you want to put a question in the chat. And thank you. That was amazing. I mean, I don't know if you all felt it, but I'm like, I want those billboard signs in my community. Absolutely. And billboards across America. So you've started something here, Patrick.
I hope so.
We are grateful for your work and your common sense approach to this of truth. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Hi. Probably what everybody is thinking is, how can we do this in our state? Like, where should we first start? I live in Oregon, and I suspect our Attorney General also is not going to be interested, or in fact, I've been told by several people. Like, who would we find, or how would we find out about our particular laws? I think we all want to replicate this.
So I would say start local, and there has to be, especially in Oregon, and I'm just thinking sort of the eastern side of the state. There has to be district attorneys or state's attorneys. They're sort of interchangeable. They're the same thing, which are looking for something to run on. And this is something to run on. This and what I and I think you have to make it easy for them, because for me, especially when people started talking to me about cannabis, I sort of thought to myself, and one of the things that kept me probably for as long as I did away from this issue was that I was dealing with the opioid epidemic. Like, we in McHenry County were losing scores of people every single year to the opioid epidemic. And that's really what had my focus. What I think needs to be made plain is, number one, we are in the midst of an epidemic as we speak, and that's the mental health epidemic. Everybody recognizes that. And a share of that we need to tease out and that we need to recognize is caused now by legalized cannabis. So part of the mental health epidemic is being caused by cannabis, and we're not able to see it like we did with opioids, because with opioids, people were dropping dead. You couldn't miss that. With the mental health epidemic, it's all sort of getting folded in and confused with sort of this broader mental health crisis that we're having. But cannabis is contributing to that. So I think that would be a good place to start, and then make it easy for them. So find whatever your Consumer Fraud and Deceptive Practices Act is out in Oregon. Find it, and there's really one provision that I had cited is gonna be there. Find that, identify it, and then also familiarize yourself with whatever the legislation was that legalized cannabis, and see what the limitations are with respect to marketing. And if you sort of take those two things and then underscore it with the importance of this because of what's going on, and then underscore it with the importance of this and how this is affecting constituents, I think there will be a lot of local states attorney, district attorneys, as well as people running for county boards or municipal trustee or whatever, which will take an interest in this. And I think ultimately this has to be a grassroots response, because the people at the top are the people that engineered legalization at the expense of sort of an unsuspecting public. And of course, as I said, I really just do not think that they want to embarrass themselves, and I don't think they want to admit that they were wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Patrick. Good question, Lee. Catherine, did you have your hand up? Hi.
Yes, I did. Hello, Patrick. Thanks for all the work that you're doing. I'm from Michigan, and I would like to do something like that too. But what has been the response from the consumers when signing the acknowledgement? Has it decreased the sales, or I know this is a start, and I don't know, they just sign it and they want their stuff, or how long has it been since you put this in place, and what has been the response?
So it's been over a year. I don't know what the response is, because we haven't sort of evaluated it, and I don't even know sort of what the metrics I would use to figure out how this is affected or how this is driving consumer behavior. That being said, I know that with the billboards, we didn't lead with, hey, this is sort of a McHenry County State's Attorney production. We just put the billboards up and we tried to quote authoritative sources that people would recognize. So Sloan Kettering, CDC, NIH, but people have figured out that we were sort of behind that, and that it was a McHenry County State's Attorney's Office production. And we have received, I wouldn't say flooded, but we have received a ton of calls of people thanking us for the work that we have done. What happened in McHenry County is just the very beginning. And I think that for the cannabis industry, it's a blip at best on their radar. I think ultimately what's going to solve this, and I think ultimately the forum where we want to have this discussion in, is a courtroom. I think that when cannabis companies begin facing liability because of the people that they've injured and the people that they've deceived, that is where I truly believe, just like tobacco, just like opioids, just like many of the other consumer products that can outflank you with their slick marketing, but they can't outflank you in a courtroom because you have the truth on your side. I think that is really what's going to raise consumer awareness. And I think that's probably the best that we can hope for. I don't think you're going to be able to get the horse back in the barn with respect to cannabis legalization. But what I do think is that if we educate enough consumers, the influence as well as the sales, as well as the use of cannabis will be something that will be reduced.
Great. All right. Thank you.
Patrick, Can you talk about the efforts that you're involved with to pursue personal liability lawsuits against the cannabis industry?
Yeah, well, I can talk about the efforts that we're involved in, David. So I'm not going to be running for state's attorney next term, and my term is up in November 30th. And so I'm looking sort of for something to do, and I'm looking for something that I think will be meaningful work. And one of the things that I've been fortunate enough is to hook up with people like Dave Evans, both a number of other attorneys, but there's fewer than I sort of initially would have thought. But there are a network of attorneys who are investigating and beginning to put together cannabis legalization. Now, as of right now, and until November 30th, I can't have my own private clients because that would be a violation of Illinois law, because I am still serving as state's attorney. But it is something that I'm investigating. It's something that I'm working on. And there's two other lawyers in Illinois that I'm working with who can accept clients, who I'm also working with and trying to sync up many of my efforts with theirs. So if anybody in Illinois or otherwise knows somebody that's been affected or injured by cannabis, I know Aubrey has my email. You can feel free to reach out to me, and I can refer you to either the people that I'm working with. If you're outside of the state of Illinois, I can refer you to some other attorneys. If you're in New Jersey, for example, I can refer you to David Evans. And I think that in addition to me, David Evans yourself would be a wonderful resource in terms of reaching out to somebody who could begin to move a claim on your behalf or somebody else's behalf forward against the cannabis industry. Because like I said, that is where there's going to be a watershed moment with this broader discussion.
Yeah, and just one point, you emphasized the fraud issue. There is a lawsuit in Michigan right now based on fraud. It was the medical marijuana case, and it got through the motion to dismiss for failure to state a claim. So that's the kind of thing that we'd be looking for. Thanks.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Patrick. There's a few questions in the chat. How does a state lawyer get funding to fight the industry?
Well, I mean, you would get so everything that I do has to be tied to state funds. So I can't use private funds in order to act under my authority. So every public official has funding, which is given to them usually by some type of legislative body. For me, it's the county board. For the attorney general, that would be the Illinois legislature. But what's nice about my job is that I have an enormous amount of discretion in terms of what I focus on and what I do and how I spend that money once it's been appropriated. So the question for other, let's say, public officials who want to do something similar, I don't think at the end of the day it's going to be a question of funding. I think at the end of the day it'll be a question of will.
Okay. And
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Roger.
Patrick, thanks. I'm very impressed with your knowledge. Not too many people in your field know much about it, but I've been at it for 30 years. I live in California, which is a disaster. And I'm of the opinion that ultimately we have to go at it at the top. I, and along with so many others, have been fighting these battles at the local level for so long, and we get crushed by the top. And at this point, when we look at the federal government and national drug policy, which is harm reduction developed by George Soros, whose motives are to destroy this country. And now we've got two candidates running. I don't know if you heard Trump's message in Florida a few days ago. He's saying medical marijuana is magic. It's done so much for my friends, and I think we should legalize it. So we got two candidates that are in favor of legalization. And I'm of the opinion that we have to take legal action against the federal government. And in California, where Governor Ganja Newsom is leading the charge to get more people to use this drug. It's not safe out here anymore. So we can keep battling this at the local level and never get anywhere, but we're really dealing with betrayal at the highest level of our government, all based on money and corruption. Do you think we should take action against the federal government?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a both and in terms of taking action. State governments as well as the federal governments have absolute immunity. The state of Illinois, for example, if you want to sue the state of Illinois for something that it's done, you have to get their permission to do it, and then you have to bring your lawsuit in a special type of court, with the Court of Claims. Now, I'm not entirely familiar with the extent of absolute immunity that the federal government has, but if the idea is that you sort of want to bring a mandamus action against the federal government to have them enforce federal law, I just don't know that that's going to be the best strategy, because I think you're going to run into a separation of powers issue with respect to a court ordering the executive to take a particular action. And if there's other lawyers on here that want to weigh in on that, I'd be interested in hearing your opinion too. But I think that's right. I think this needs to be hearts and minds, and this needs to be diplomacy, and it needs to be lobbying, and it needs to be legislation, and it needs to be local. And I know that SAM, which is Smart Approaches to Marijuana, they're doing a ton of great work in DC, as well as, I think, creating quite a big footprint of influence that hopefully will at least limit in places like DC, sort of the open arms that many state governments has had to what is a very big, effective, and well-funded cannabis lobby. But just sort of back to your point, I honestly think that the solution to this comes when you threaten the cannabis industry's bottom line. I think that the best way to do that is to not rely on the government, especially those in DC, to solve this problem for you. And this is my respectful opinion. But I think that in a court of law, there are such good and viable cases that once the floodgates open, there's going to be a lot of lawyers who recognize it, and the cannabis industry is going to be going to be put in a defensive posture, and a lot of people are going to learn about what the dangers are, because we're going to be having a discussion in court based on truth and based on findings of the evidence. And once those findings are publicized, it's going to be indisputable.
Yeah, I agree with that entirely. This is Dr. Matt Pauling. I'm here in Texas, and there's so much of what's taking place in our capitalist society, for better or worse, as explained by following the money. And yeah, I think once it's clear there's more money to be made suing the industry than there is from the industry selling their dangerous product, this will all turn around.
Right.
But the way we get to that point quicker, we'll get there eventually. It's just a matter of time. This is a question of whether it's going to be in 3 generations or 2 generations or maybe just 1 generation. The way we get there is we need to tamper with the jury pool. We need, it's really the education aspect, I think, is the most important, most crucial game that we need to play here. So I think your billboards probably are going to have a better impact than anything.
So I think that's a terrific point, and one of the considerations of any litigation, which is going to make which I think will be a deciding factor in the first round of cannabis litigation as to whether or not it's successful or not, is where you actually bring the action. So as I've been sort of thinking about this, Southern Illinois, to me, and I'm sure there's other places which sort of would meet the criteria, but Southern Illinois is a great place because it has a very resentful, more conservative population who's just constantly shaking its fist at Chicago because they just have the numbers, and in terms of what their policies are, they just roll everybody in Southern Illinois who just has to live with it and just does not have the influence to stop it. But I think Southern Illinois would be a really viable venue to bring these types of cases because there's not as many dispensaries down there. They haven't done as much marketing down there. But those types of places in a left-leaning state, finding sort of conservative pockets which are fed up with a lot that's going on with the state, I think would be the perfect place to do it. And I think that would be a population that would be very amenable to our message as well as the science.
Yeah, Patrick, I think you're absolutely correct in this, and not relying on the government, but doing what was done with tobacco and opiates to do the litigation. As far as Roger's concerned about the federal government, the law that we're trying to enforce is the Controlled Substances Act and also the food and drug laws. There is no private right of enforcement of those laws. You have no right as a citizen to go to court to compel the Attorney General to enforce the Controlled Substances Act. And that has been litigated already in the courts. The Attorney General also has discretion in deciding what laws he or she will enforce or emphasize. The other thing is, I'm willing to sue anybody, including the federal government, but it takes a lot of money to do that. And nobody has come up with the money yet to do that. So we'd all like to be able to have this done in one knockout blow. That's what's going to happen. As far as funding lawsuits, there are funds available for these personal injury lawsuits. The lawsuits we have in New York are fully funded. We have 2 lawsuits in New Jersey that are funded, one that's partially funded. We have provided money in Minnesota. If anybody's from Minnesota, we need some plaintiffs there. So I think it would also depend on the quality and nature of the case. If there's a really good plaintiff's personal injury case, you're not going to have any trouble getting lawyers to take it on a contingent basis. But we need to do that.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you so much for all your work too. Patrick, are you willing to share your PowerPoint with this group?
Yes, and I emailed it to you, I would say right before noon. So if you don't have it, I can email it again, but feel free to share that with anybody.
Thank you so much. And then there's 2 questions from Jesse LeBlanc. What are your thoughts about hemp in the 2018 Farm Bill? And then are you aware of the connection between cannabis use and mass shootings?
So the 2018 Farm Bill, I don't have a strong opinion on that one way or the other, and that's I think something that I got to read up a little bit more on. So I'm sorry that I'm just not able to answer that one. Yes, of course I'm aware of the connection between well, it's not just mass shootings; it's also violence. One of the things that I say to people when I talk to them, and I say, okay, now that you're read in on cannabis, and now that I've sort of given you the broad strokes of the effects that it has. Pay attention to the newspaper, and when you read some overly dramatic, surreal form of violence, I can guarantee you that cannabis played a role in that. We in McHenry County, we don't get a ton of murders just because we don't have the gang presence that like a Cook County would have, but we do have a fair bit of murders. And in 2022, 3 of the defenses to the murders was cannabis-induced psychosis. I'll tell you the story. One guy, he was a Chicago resident, and he had been suffering from mental health. It's sort of a chicken or the egg thing, whether it's cannabis or whether it's mental health. But he was sort of having a little bit of a mental health event. He thought that he would treat it by smoking high potency cannabis, and then he thought that he needed to clear his head, so he went for a drive out of Chicago. He ends up on a rural road in McHenry County, and he's listening to Howard Stern on the radio, who's interviewing David Spade. And according to him, David Spade tells him to crash into oncoming traffic at 80 miles an hour, which he subsequently does. He kills a father of 2, and the other man who was in the car is so seriously injured, both in terms of suffering physical injury, but also brain injury, that he's never going to leave the physical rehabilitation home that he's currently in. So devastating results. And what I will also say is that if you pay attention to to the relationship between three disorders, schizophrenia, schizoaffective, and bipolar with psychotic symptoms, and their relationships to murder. You'll find that they make up about 2% of the population, but are responsible for over a third of the murders that occur in this country. And so if you're putting out into the bloodstream of a society a drug that increases the prevalence of those types of disorders, you're going to have more violence as well as more dramatic forms of violence.
Yes, unfortunately, and then the one case that's coming up here is the Rockford stabbings there in Illinois that I'm sure were cannabis-induced psychosis, but I'm just wondering, Patrick, do they even test for marijuana during those violent acts in Illinois?
No, I mean, most of the time, probably not, because you would have to get a warrant to take somebody's blood if they're unwilling to do so. Most of the time, when cannabis would be in your blood, you got to remember, cannabis is hydrophobic, so it gets out of your blood super, super quick. So you'd have to take the test almost immediately. And by the time you sort of figure out that cannabis is involved, usually it's a little too late by then.
Yeah, we need policy for to expose the toxicology reports and have accurate testing for the cannabinoids. So yes, there's another discussion. There's a lot of questions and comments in the chat. Dr. Karen Randall, who was featured on Dr. Phil with us, she says the tax revenue from cannabis looks attractive, but when you add in the cost of medical care, the tax revenue would be rapidly consumed. But the reality is that the cost of medical care are essentially being most shared with everyone in the community, Medicaid or no pay patients. Yes. Let's see, let's go here. Let's just have you on mute if you have a comment or question. And we do have Brian Spacer here in the meeting who has experienced horrific event of cannabis-induced psychosis. We are grateful for her being here, and please reach out to Every Brain Matters if you would like her to come talk to your community and provide that valuable education. Any more related? I'm kind of going through this. Yeah, that's a good comment, Chrissy. Anyone else? Go ahead and unmute.
Somebody asked if I had a twin in Texas, and
yeah, that was me.
Okay, so I don't know where you live, but in Houston, Texas,
Yes.
if anybody's in Houston, there's a place called Kenneally's Pub, Irish Pub, and that's my aunt's pub. And I have a cousin down there. It would be insulting him to say that he looks like me, but I guess in a certain light that could be that could be.
Yeah. You know, what I meant was someone who acts and has your knowledge, not anything having to do with how you look. But I need a lawyer in Texas for my son who went into cannabis-induced psychosis, and I want to go after a specific company. And I talked to Dave Evans, and I haven't got back with him again, but I want somebody in Texas to take this case, and that's why I was asking.
Why don't you email me? I know lawyers who have networks outside of Illinois, and let me see what I can do. If you email me your name and just a brief description of your case, I'd be happy to say. I mean, I can't make any promises, and I can't personally represent you at this time, but I can see if I could leverage some of those relationships.
Okay, thanks.
And I'll send an email out with the link to the presentation, Patrick's information, his PowerPoint and everything within the next couple of weeks. So you guys can have all that information and network and connect and find those resources you need to hold this predatory addiction for profit industry accountable. Patrick, just a question, with those billboards, the 100,000 that you got from the industry, did that pay for those billboards?
Oh, so that not only paid for the billboards, those billboards out here have been up for 6 months already, and then we have another 50,000 left to spend, and we're going to do one billboard on I-90 going into Chicago. So yeah, so we're gonna do the one. Where the doctor says if cannabis is medicine, so is Budweiser. I think that will probably get the most attention, and we're gonna put that right outside Chicago on the interstate heading into the city. So that should get a lot of eyeballs on it.
Wow. Wow. That's great. Anyone else? Catherine.
I'd like to ask another question. So you seem like you've started this in Illinois. Has other communities or counties come to you and say, we'd like to do something similar? Or is
No.
it the spread or
No,
no?
I mean,
It's
no.
all about the revenue then.
Yeah, and it's sort of a third rail. You got to remember, like, so I run in a partisan race. Illinois, especially where I live, is deeply, deeply Democratic. The Democratic Party in Illinois is deeply invested in cannabis. And so it just doesn't make sense for a lot of people to stick their neck out on this, especially if it's going to draw the ire of the party of unchecked power here in Illinois.
I just can't believe how much politics is so involved in the marijuana industry and court system and everything. It's just, to me, not fair. Very upsetting.
Yep.
Because we are the ones that have lost loved ones. We are the ones going through the hell of helping our families. And it's just, if you don't go through it, you don't know, and no one else really cares. That's the sad until it affects them. And with the marijuana industry and the way they promote it in medical, like we said, you're just going to see this all over again in the tobacco industry. And it's just a shame, but thank you for your work.
Thank you.
And thank you, Catherine. Catherine is a pioneer of this work, and we know that many families here have lived the devastating consequences, and our hearts are with you and our work with you, and we will continue to advocate for other families and accountability with this cannabis industry by linking arms. And so thank you, Catherine. I think Roger wanted to say something, and then we'll go to Lawrence and then Mary. Roger, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I'd like to just take a brief moment about the federal government. I have been at it for about 30 years, and I was packing up my office saying, I don't think I'm helping anybody anymore. So at the end of that, I said, God, should I throw all this stuff in the trash? And I heard very clearly, no, take out George Soros. Now, I don't know if you know about Soros. A lot of people don't. I happened to meet him personally 20 years ago and ask him why he wasn't in jail for all that he had done to destroy lives and kill people. That was in 2003 at the National Press Club. Since that time, he has done everything imaginable to destroy this country. And his motivation is not just to make money from marijuana, although I'm sure he does, but he uses it as a weapon to destroy this country and to dumb down and destroy our kids. And currently, if you're not aware, he has endowed his son, Alexander, with $25 billion. That's $1 million, 25,000 times to carry on this journey. And Alexander has open access to the White House. And so my contention, and I'm not a lawyer, and I'll never stand up against you or Dave Evans, but I don't believe that the betrayal, as I see it here, is that the federal government, even by Soros's own words, has a responsibility to protect the people in this country. And for 15 years, since Obama was in office, put there by Soros, the federal government has done nothing to raise awareness about the harms of this drug. They've even suppressed it. And the current drug policy is called harm reduction. It's an absolute joke. It eliminates prevention entirely. It encourages drug use. And if you look at the Democratic what do they call it, the criminal justice platform. They are even planning to hire 50 assistant U.S. attorneys to ensure that people have access to marijuana. And the ultimate end of that, I mean, they heroically offer treatment, which most addicts don't want, but then they don't prosecute crime. And so California, I mean, we have Prop 47, which means you can steal up to $950 and not get prosecuted. We've got a governor that is since 2014, when Soros drafted him, he has promoted marijuana. 65% of our communities still say no, but doesn't mean they can't get it. And in Florida, my family happens to be in Florida. I have a 21-year-old son who is at the University of Miami. And I recently had a chat with him. I said, Jack, I'm told 44% of students here or in America are using marijuana, 19 to 22-year-olds. What do you think? He said, Grandpa, you're not even close. Everybody does it. And when you know the impact on the brain, which isn't developed until 25 or 30, what are we doing to our kids? And that's only one university. Yeah. You know, we've got University of Davis, California Davis out here, where last year a kid who was an honor student got a full ride scholarship to Davis. He's a junior. Last year he stabbed and killed 3 people. He obviously maxed out on marijuana.
Thank you, Roger.
And so the whole psychosis thing, this is a weapon against our people. We got 1,000 people a day dying on American soil because of drug-related causes. There isn't any war in American history that even comes close to that. So I believe that we have to hold our governments responsible for what we elected them to do, which is to protect the people, even by George Soros standards. That's what he says. So anyway, I'll shut up and thank you again for all you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. It does seem like a hopeless situation with both political parties failing our families, but this conversation today, what Patrick's doing, what Dave is doing, what other people here in this meeting are doing is going to give us a pathway to that hope and accountability. So thank you for your comments. Let's go to Lawrence, Mary, and then Renee. Lawrence?
Yeah, thank you. Patrick, I live in South Carolina, and we do not yet have legalization of medical marijuana, but it is the Republicans, believe it or not, here, the so-called conservative Christian Republicans here, or that are not all, but there's a handful of them that are pushing it like crazy. And I started a website, keepsc.org, and my motto is marijuana is not medicine. Get the facts here. And I'm just distributing cards and index and talking to people and talking to businesses and talking to churches and talking to school people. Do you have, so I know in January, when they get back into session, it's going to be an all out, just full force, because they got it through the Senate last year. They're going to, unless they stop it before it gets into the committee, it will be rushed through special order as quick as possible this coming January. Do you have anything, tell me what I can do other than what I'm doing to stop this disgusting stuff from coming into my beautiful state?
I mean, I'd like to, like, I think I'm being realistic when I say that at least in the current situation, at least with regard to sort of the prevailing winds, it's going to be very difficult to stop. You know, my first piece of advice would be to follow the money. So who, especially with these Republicans, who is giving them campaign donations, what PACs are supporting them. And if you do see large donations coming in from what would ostensibly be sort of non-cannabis, a lot of times they can filter money through other politicians. So politicians could give each other money. So if the cannabis industry is giving one politician money, they can give, at least that's how it is in Illinois. They can then they can take that and give it to another politician to sort of hide where the money has come from. But I do think that following the money and the just Brinks trucks that are being backed up into state capitals everywhere and exposing that would be a really good place to start. Another really good place to start would be with your local officials and just sort of get a sense of who's who and what's what and who's doing what in your state. So a lot of times for me, I don't live anywhere near Springfield, Illinois. And so getting a sense of the lay of the land down there and who are my potential allies versus who are my adversaries, I don't know. But who can give you a really good idea of what the lay of the land is your local representative who, if they're doing their job, would be more than happy to meet with a constituent and align you with other people because they are so well organized and our side of the fence is, this is probably the best run sort of, well, I guess Sam as well. But we just do not have the presence that they have a lot of places simply by virtue of the fact that we do not have the resources. But the more that we can band together and unite our voices, the stronger ultimately it's going to be. That all being said, I worry for North Carolina, especially if the cannabis industry has put a target on it.
Yeah, I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and we've stopped medical marijuana there. I think, first of all, you have to understand why people are in favor of medical marijuana. I mean, besides from the cynical money and all that kind of stuff, they really think they're doing the right thing. And they start off with the premise that marijuana is not that bad to begin with. That's the common belief. And then they get people who give them anecdotal stories about how marijuana saved their lives, cured their cancer. They bring in people with wheelchairs and all this kind of stuff. I am personally responsible for the American Bar Association being in favor of medical marijuana. I fell for this back in the mid-1980s and got presented with all those arguments. And I thought, God, the FDA is really being unreasonable. Look at all these poor people. And I got it through the ABA House of Delegates. And then a couple of moms from the anti-drug movement got a hold of me, put me in the backseat of their car and slapped me around for an hour. And I realized what a mistake I'd made, but I had the best of intentions. So the issue is these people are ignorant about the true nature of marijuana. And you have to drip, 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 drip and educate them. So what I did in North Carolina, I'll share all this with you. I sent about a letter a week out to the legislators, emails minimally effective, but a 1 or 2 page letter with some information about marijuana that was well documented. Now, when I testified before the North Carolina legislature on this, there must have been 10 to 15 highly paid lobbyists on the other side, and I won. So assume that people are ignorant, assume that they're acting in good faith, assume that they need good information, and we have a ton of information, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 page letters that you can send out. You need money for stamps. You need money to, get a copy or to copy up the letters. I don't think the whole campaign cost us more than $5,000. And it has not even been able to come up for a vote in the North Carolina House right now. They couldn't even get enough Republicans to vote to even have it brought up. Now, I don't know if that'll change next year, but, with all of this, the marijuana industry is an aircraft carrier, and we're all little tugboats. And if we get enough tugboats going, present the evidence in a way that's useful, we have to present emotional arguments. One of the things that I did is put in an article that Sally knows this well, photograph of her son and other marijuana victims. We told the stories of these victims, what had happened to them. So far, it's been effective. The same thing happened with opiates. Same thing happened with tobacco. You had governments in the past supporting the tobacco industry. Nobody would dream of doing that today. When I was 16 and was at a military academy in Virginia, they sold cigarettes to the students in the student canteen. That would be unthinkable today, but nobody thought anything of it back then. So we can't get downhearted about this. We have to understand that a lot of these people think they're doing the right thing because people are telling them very convincingly that marijuana has helped them with this or that. So we have arguments about all of that. I'd be happy to share everything with you. You can use it as your own, no problem. And we have a lot of information available. As far as the lawsuits go, my organization, Cannabis Industry Victims Educating Litigators, it is our job to educate litigators about this. We now have a group of class action law firms that are very interested in this. We're meeting on a regular basis. What we need are good plaintiffs. We need people that have good cases to come forward, and that's how you attract lawyers. In the Michigan case, we had to educate the attorney, and finally talking to Bertha Madras from Harvard Medical School is what turned the corner for that lawyer, and now he's doing a good job of pursuing that case. And Patrick is absolutely right that we are on equal footing with these people when we go into court. I don't care how much money they have, how much political influence they have, okay? We are on equal footing if we can get into court and get good plaintiffs. And that's what we're looking for. And I realize it's sometimes a slow process, but I think Patrick is absolutely on target. And I want to compliment him on the depth of very good, excellent information he just presented. This is really an outstanding talk on these issues. So thanks.
Thanks, David.
Thank you. Okay, we're gonna go to Mary and then Renee/Amy, and then we're gonna end the meeting because I think we could talk all day about this. We want to be mindful of Patrick's and all of your time. So Mary Brown, would you like to ask a question?
You bet. Thank you. Thank you very much, Patrick. This was very, very helpful. I'm a little bit of small potatoes here in Ohio, but the way that I am approaching it is through the parents, because I'm primarily looking at the youth right now. I deal a lot of times with adult addicts and alcoholics. For one of the questions I ask is, when was the first time you used? And over again, it's 13 to 15 years old. And they've been smoking every single day for 15 years. So I have gone to the schools now, and I'm talking to some schools. And one of the questions I've asked, first of all, I called school counselors, and their answer was, well, no, we don't have that problem here. We don't have that problem here. And then I talked to a school resource officer, a police officer in the schools, thinking I'm going to get some information from them, and they echoed that same response. No, we don't have that problem here. Yet when you talk to parents, the parents are like, oh yes, it's here. You talk to kids in middle school and high school, it's prevalent, absolutely. So that is the angle that I'm taking right now, is going to the parents and hopefully getting into the schools that way and talking a little bit more seriously about that. But I just wanted to ask you if you had any suggestions, anything you would advise, or any advice there. But again, thank you for all that you did, Don.
Thank you very much for the kind words. I would say, so when based on the data that the Illinois Department of Health Services is giving us, the use rate of youth, both annual as well as last 30 days, has not increased since legalization. Now, you got to remember that's based on surveys. That's not like the gold standard scientific evidence, but let's just presume for a second that that's true. First of all, that's a good argument to keep cannabis illegal, because it shows that because it's illegal for youth to use it in Illinois. And if you keep something illegal, the use rates are not going to go up. So that's number one. But secondly, the cannabis that is available for those kids from a dispensary that do choose to use is not the stuff that I was smoking. It's certainly not the stuff that Dave Evans was smoking. It can be THC content as high in Illinois. It can be THC content as high as 33%. In other states, it can go all the way up to 100. But like you could just be injecting pure THC, basically, is what a lot of people are looking for. So, and what the studies show is that the more you use and the higher concentration of THC, the greater the risks. So, so even if it's true that kids are basically using at the same amount that they're not using the same stuff, it's in almost a different category than the stuff that used to be available that they're probably comparing it to.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mary. And Renee?
Hi, this is from Amy. Do you involve pediatricians in any cases, and do you support having backing of youth medical providers? For example, letters or physician statements on marijuana to help build a case? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, so we're going to be looking for, so yes, I think one of the strongest arguments, as Dave said, is that if you're going to fight this thing publicly, you're fighting a public relations campaign. If they're going to be pulling on the heartstrings in terms of people that are suffering from certain conditions, saying that marijuana helps them, we need to be pulling on the heartstrings in terms of people who have been affected by that. And I think probably one of the strongest arguments is going to be kids who have smoked or used recreational marijuana who have been impacted in a significantly adverse way. And I think the people that can make that case are pediatricians. Now, when it comes to actually suing the cannabis industry, I don't know that a pediatrician is going to be the most helpful, let's say, quote unquote, expert in the case, because we would be suing a dispensary based on their legal sales of cannabis, which would necessarily include somebody, at least in Illinois, somebody who's over the age of 21. If the youth illegally used cannabis in a way that it isn't marketed, and as long as they're not marketing it to youth, it would be difficult to hold the cannabis dispensary producers, transporters accountable for that.
Thank you. I guess I would follow up with the medical marijuana cards that are dispensed to the younger individual.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. And I have to check the law in Illinois. I just don't know it off my head, but I wonder if somebody who's, let's say, 18 could get a medical marijuana card. And I also think that another area of litigation, which is just ripe for activity, is malpractice suits against doctors for prescribing cannabis.
For sure. Thank you. And let's just wrap it up. I know there's a statute of limitations. I know Chrissy put a question about that, and it's different for each state. I just want to say that, do you know what it is, Patrick, in Illinois?
So it would be 2 years from when you realize that you were injured. So one of the ways that we can extend the statute of limitations is if you have not and could not have reasonably associated your injury with cannabis, then the statute of limitations can be extended. But generally, it's about 2 years from the time of injury.
And we do know that, and what Dave had mentioned earlier, there are individual lawsuits and there are class action lawsuits developing in certain states. We are looking for plaintiffs. Please subscribe to the Every Brain Matters newsletters to continue to be updated on which lawsuits are developing where and when. We need lead plaintiffs for class action lawsuits to lead us into those bigger lawsuits. And there are statutes of limitations with that. I know the one developing in Colorado it's a 2-year statute of limitations, and the person needs to be fully recovered so they can testify of what happened to them. So please subscribe to our newsletter to get updated on the lawsuits that are developing. Patrick, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you.
Thank you.
The work you've done. You're giving us hope and a pathway to hold this predatory industry accountable, and we love that. So many of us, it's too late for our families, but we want to protect the families, and we are here to educate and advocate for that. So thank you for your time. You spent over 2 hours with us today, and we know your time is valuable. You do amazing work, and we continue to work with you and people like Dave Evans and all the good people here on this meeting to advocate and find protections for our families. So thank you.
Thanks again for having me.
Okay. Take care, everybody. Enjoy your day. Excellent presentation.